Welcome to our Buckeye podcast, where we will be discussing all things related to organ donation and transplantation. Hello, I'm Jeff Arrington, President and CEO at Buckeye Transplant Services. We are joined today by two of our very own coordinators, Melissa Bocage and Angie Schwaller. We'll be discussing their path to Buckeye along with their transition to the transplant center side of things, also known as the Secret Society of Transplantation. We'll also be discussing on ways we could make improvements to the allocation system here in the United States. All this and more coming up next. Yeah, so really excited about the podcast today, and especially bringing in Angie Schwaller and Melissa Bocage. Thank you for joining. You know, when we started Buckeye in 2008 with a single center, currently we're almost up to 60. And, Jill and I really, one of the things we've always enjoyed doing is getting to know and having relationships with our coordinators. So doing things like this just allows us to, get to know people personally. That's something we really try to do here at Buckeye. Angie, you've been an RN for 19 years. I think you started in the ICU in New York before you came south to Emory. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey to the field of organ donation?
Yeah. So yes, I did. I went directly to the intensive care unit out of nursing school. I had the unique opportunity to do that at a teaching hospital. They had an extensive training program wherein they allowed new nurses to go directly to the ICU. So when I did that until I moved down here, as you said, down to where I am now, down south. While I was up north before I moved down here, I think I mentioned that I saw one of the coordinators, organ placement coordinators up north, and got speaking with her. Thought, well, that sounds like something I might be interested in. Further on down the line, is if I get a little, weary of ICU. She was there just kind of doing her own thing, and she really liked her job. So fast forward to moving to Georgia, where I am now. Fast forward to my second child, and the opportunity came via word of mouth that there was a position open at a local OPO here, and I applied and thankfully got the job. It's a wonderful OPO down here where I am, and a lot of good training. And I worked from home, and this OPO in Georgia has a position called an organ placement coordinator. And essentially what we do is we work from home behind the scenes, and we place kidneys and pancreas, and we act as a live QA, if you will. So the coordinators go on site, and we help them enter the data into the UNOS DonorNet website. We double check the data that they enter and make sure that it looks correct. We make sure all the attachments are attached correctly and remove any duplicates. We provide a second signature for ABOs. Any kind of live QA process that you can imagine, we do that live. And then when it comes time to place kidneys and pancreas, we do that. So we work very closely with the on-site coordinators. We're in constant communication with them. And so although I was working from an OPO perspective side, I was putting the organs out to transplant centers. I also had the unique opportunity to, kind of work both sides, the OPO side, and I was in communication with the 3 transplant centers here located in Georgia and worked closely with them. So I really felt it was kind of an easy transition for me to come to Buckeye, and in that I did have that experience with the transplant center side in taking and giving offers and talking to surgeons. Another thing that I forgot to mention with this OPO here in Georgia, every organ that one of the transplant centers brought into the state came through us somehow. So we would prepare, so that we were aware of it and we could track what was coming into the state. It was just something that our OPO wanted to do. I also took hard offers for a local transplant center here in Georgia until we finally got the surgeons to feel comfortable with letting some of his own coordinators do it. But yeah, so this position, the OPO, just kind of fell into my lap. Thankfully, allowed me to work from home and be home with my newborn. It's been great ever since. I really enjoy it.
Is that how you were introduced to Buckeye when you were placing organs for the OPO there in Georgia?
Oh, no, no, I was stalking Buckeye in a good way. I found Buckeye on LinkedIn when I was working at the OPO. Just started putting out some feelers for different, working with it from a different perspective than from the OPO perspective. Just kind of getting burnt out a little bit on the OPO end. And took a little break, went to teach middle school healthcare science right the same year as the COVID blew up, and quickly realized that it was actually best. My husband owns his own business, and so he needs to be able to leave the house at odd times. Neither one of us have worked 9 to 5 jobs ever. So it just turns out that it was better for me working from home. So I had remembered that I found Buckeye years ago on LinkedIn and just reached out, just sent my resume, reached out, made calls. I felt like I felt that I was kind of pestering Jill a little bit, um, but I really wanted to demonstrate that I was qualified and very interested in working with Buckeye, and I'm really glad it worked out because it's proven to be great. I love the contract I'm working on. My surgeons are wonderful. I couldn't work with a better group, honestly. Nobody likes to be woken up in the middle of the night with an offer, but that's why we do what we do, because we're helping people. And so yeah, so that's how I found you. I found you years ago, and then kind of came back full circle.
Yeah, and that's been one of the recipes of our success. You mentioned that relationship you have with the surgeons,
Yeah.
and we create that small team that has that. It's almost like a family type of atmosphere that we're able to deliver to our centers. So thank you for that. Melissa, you're also an RN, also made the journey from the north to the south. I think you started in Pennsylvania at the Gift of Life there in Philly and ended up down in Mississippi.
Yes, I sure did.
Melissa, you also have a journey from the north to the south. I think you started at Gift of Life Philly and then ended up in Mississippi. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure, that is true. I was in Philadelphia for, my whole life until 2 years ago. So I've been a nurse for 16 years now. Started out in pediatrics, labor and delivery, and then moved over to organ donation at our local OPO in Philadelphia. I was there for just coming on 2 years, starting to get burned out, trying to figure out if I was going to stay or go, what to do next. I was considering returning to the Children's Hospital in the critical care nurse pool, which they call something different. But I was considering going back to pediatric critical care on the float team, which would have been, all 3 ICUs at the Children's Hospital that I had worked at previously. That versus staying with my OPO, and then unfortunately, my husband's place of business had an explosion and the refinery shut down in Philadelphia. So we were then faced with, a lot of decisions very quickly. And we landed in a small little town on the coast of Mississippi called Ocean Springs, which I'm really excited about now. I was a little scared of then. I had never been to Mississippi before, and we visited 4 days. I came post call from one of my 48-hour weekends at Gift of Life. Flew into Mobile, Alabama, met with his boss basically to tell him, there's no way I'm moving to Mississippi. And within 12 hours of being here, thought, oh gosh, what am I going to do now? Because I love it and we're going to move. So, I knew with my nursing credentials, I would be able to find a position in a local hospital. But with having, no childcare, no family or friends here initially when we first moved, we had just planned on me being home for 6 months to a year while we kind of figured out what we were doing, got our footing, and I worked on getting my nursing license in Mississippi. So in doing all of that, I had spoken with one of my former colleagues at Gift of Life Philadelphia, who I have, so much respect for. He knows he knows everything to do with organs so well. A few times that I had him teach classes I was in, I was just, on the edge of my seat, excited to hear everything he had to say. So I called him. His name's Tim. I called him and said, what ideas do you have for me working from here? The small town that I'm in is small, but Mississippi, there's a lot of rural areas, and I knew I did not want to work 24-hour shifts, driving hours and hours and hours. Even if childcare did allow for that, I knew that wasn't going to be for me anymore. So he gave me Buckeye's name, the name of the company. I looked over the website, thought that it sounded great. I just called the phone number, and Matt Terry actually answered, and I just, introduced myself, told him my experience, and said, I'd love to have a job. And then he sent in my resume, and it kind of just went from there.
Awesome. I'm glad Matt picked up the phone. And hey, I remember having a conversation in the wintertime that I think when you didn't have to shovel snow in January, that was a good thing. So, as in the field of organ donation and transplantation, there's two sides. There's the OPO side, which is the organ procurement organization, and they go out and talk to families and get the donation process started. Then there's the transplant center side that gets the information from the OPOs and goes through the process to make the transplant happen. And there's a difference between both. And we're all OPO people. 90% of our coordinators come from the OPO. So would like to kind of get into what that transition was like. Working from home is a little bit different feel. What working at Buckeye from home works for you? What do you like about it? What were some of the challenges you faced from coming over from the OPO to the transplant side? Angie, I don't know if you have any feedback on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So at my OPO, I was in the unique position wherein I worked from home, even though I was employed by the OPO. Doing placing kidneys and pancreas, as I mentioned, and doing a kind of a live QA type position. But I can speak to some of the coordinators. We work closely with the coordinators that went out on site, and there is something to be said about OPO burnout. They get tired of going out and having to stay there 24 hours and staying awake uh, for 24 hours at a time. They end up, some women with female nurses who go out at the OPOs on site, end up having children, and that doesn't work for their family life anymore. And I really think that they get really tired of the 24-hour shifts. And that contributes a lot to burnout. And I think it's probably different at each OPO as well. Each OPO functions differently than another OPO, so maybe burnout happens more at one than the other. I really don't know for sure, but I think for the most part, uh, for me, coming from my OPO to Buckeye was a really not a huge change for me. I was fortunate that my position at Lifelink of Georgia was such that I was able to interact with the transplant centers and be while being employed at the OPO. And so it really offered me insight into both sides. I think that being with Buckeye, it does offer a little bit more of a um, life work balance. Even though we do 24-hour shifts here, we are working from home. Um, we we take calls for a certain amount of centers. Buckeye does a great job with their what's it called, Jeff, that you use your scale to kind of determine your case workload.
Yeah, so we developed a scoring tool because obviously
Yeah,
every transplant center is a little bit different.
yeah,
So the number of offers they receive, the transplants that they do, the number of transplants they do. Every center has a different process and some difficulty levels, and so we score each one. And so that's one of the things that our quality team looks at on a monthly, quarterly basis are those scores because obviously new surgeons come in, allocation practices change, policies change. Like the kidney allocation in March. So we kind of have that sweet spot, like you mentioned, the burnout, and that's something that we do on a regular basis is really look at those numbers and come up with that scoring that is kind of in the wheelhouse of where we need to be as far as team activities.
And it really shows. It really shows. I do not foresee the burnout with Buckeye as I think frequently happens with the OPO. I mean, at the OPO, you just kind of you're forced to just keep taking it as it comes, and it's really not considered that the workload is it. I don't know if it can't be considered. I'm not sure. It probably can't to some degree, based on just the function, the OPO function. I don't really know, but Buckeye does a great job.
Yeah, and that's something we have to be careful with because, as you mentioned before, one of the secrets to, not really a secret, but one of the things that we do well is really put these teams together and match them up with the transplant center. And a team atmosphere is really cultivated. It's almost like a family type feel. The relationships we build with the surgeons, all that's key. So when activity gets to certain places, or like you mentioned, that team score, and we have to split teams up, that's a real sensitive topic because our transplant centers don't want to lose their team, and so we really look at that carefully. But we also understand as things change, as things change, we just have to make those changes too, because as you mentioned, we do what we can, to avoid burnout and obviously turnover. Melissa, why don't you talk about your move from the OPO to Buckeye? Maybe what was it like for you? Again, I think that from what I hear of a lot of coordinators that come to us, that there's kind of an eye-opening moment of because obviously we understood everything that happened on the OPO side, and we made assumptions of what happened on the transplant center side. But a lot of folks that get to us, they're like, wow, I didn't realize, this was going on here. I had no idea. So can you tell us a little bit about your move over to the transplant side, Melissa?
So when I made the transition from the OPO to the transplant side, it was actually probably smoother than I would have thought, but pretty eye-opening in a lot of areas. Now, having come into transplant from having so many different experiences, I was used to having to learn new things and used to having to adapt and change. Um, one of the things that I loved about Buckeye and loved with the position and the opportunity to learn the new position was there is a lot of autonomy, but there's also a lot of team. So when I had Jared and Scott teaching me the new side of things, there was really a lot of opportunity for me to ask questions and kind of figure out what was what. I think one of the most difficult things initially was just figuring out with my 3 contracts, which acronyms stood for what, which contract was for which organs, which surgeons wanted to hear, the heart size before they heard the history versus which one wanted to hear, something else. The similarities were there as well because at Gift of Life in Philadelphia, I would make initial offers to our surgeons. So I was used to those conversations. The difference now was just that I was, not giving them every single offer. I was using the auto rule-outs that I had and then trickling the offers that were necessary to go through the surgeon. So I think the biggest difference was just I didn't realize when I was a donor coordinator on site and I would push that button out to send all the offers out, I didn't realize where those offers were going beyond our initial centers. Our initial centers, we would speak with the surgeons. All of the other centers, we would speak with transplant coordinators. And I would become frustrated when I was on the other side, if I was waiting any length of time. Really, I just wanted things to go on my own time frame because, as a donor coordinator, you're pretty busy and you're just trying to make all the moving parts fit together. I didn't really realize that the person that I was sending offers to was also getting tons of other offers, some good, some bad, some requiring more critical attention right away than others. So I didn't really fully realize that. So in coming to Buckeye and seeing our side of things, it was really interesting just to see the number of offers that would come in, good and bad. It was interesting to see the number of offers that would come in that were not good at all, and really made me understand why, Buckeye exists and why we exist, and why it's very important to have, someone with a medical background review these offers to, not overburden the surgeons with every single offer, because I'm telling you, some of these offers that we get, we are able to auto rule them out and not move them forward. And really, I think that has to help the surgeons a great bit, because they're getting called all the time. Often, it's not uncommon that I'm calling a surgeon with a heart offer when they're, they just finished cannulating for ECMO, or they're scrubbed into the OR, or, they work wonderfully a lot. So they don't really need any extra noise. In transitioning to Buckeye, seeing the view of UNOS is very different. I honestly don't remember what my view looked like before, but just seeing how, all the data and everything is different. Seeing how important it is now to have things entered appropriately, labeled appropriately, to have the information there, is very different. When I was on the donor side, I would just think, that other person they can just kind of do that themselves. I didn't realize that they were also doing so many tasks at once. I think that the transition was pretty smooth, but I do think that it was very eye-opening. And I'm grateful that I had the experience that I had before Buckeye, just so I can kind of see the, both sides of things.
Yeah, and that's a good point. Yeah, it's a good point you bring up, and a good transition into the next topic of the allocation system that is currently in place. You brought up the donor net view, and we've said it, multiple times in different ways, why we don't see the same thing. And I'm not sure how many OPO coordinators know that there's two different views in donor net. So what they're putting in and how they see the UNet screen is different from how they see it on the transplant side. And then you get into the 30-minute window when you're notified of a primary offer, in 30 minutes to review over 200 data points in UNet, plus 15 attachments with 10 pages each. It is difficult. And I know that there's some friction there when an OPO reaches out and says you're primary, and you have 30 minutes to evaluate. To do that effectively can pose some challenges. So Angie, I don't know if you have any input on that when you are notified of a primary offer and you're looking for information. How do you approach that 30-minute window of time when you're primary?
Yeah, I do have a couple of comments on that. I think uh, that some of these things speak to the local OPOs in terms of training and how they communicate and train their employees. Um, I when I was trained at my OPO, I was made aware that the transplant centers had a different view, and I was made aware that when our because I at my OPO I placed kidney and pancreas. When I was trained, I was told, listen, so the transplant centers are getting offers, on the heart and the liver and this and that, and so just wait a little while, give them about half an hour before you shoot out your kidney offers or your KP offer. So I really feel very fortunate in that when I came to Buckeye, I was already kind of aware of that. I was aware that they had a different view, and sometimes would give them a heads up. Hey, this is what it looks like for my day. I have 3 cases going on, and I would inform my local transplant centers of that information so they could kind of plan their day. I don't know. That's just how I roll. But And I did want to point out, something along the lines of OPOs and transitioning. I don't know who would be listening to this podcast, and I hope that you're gleaning some really good information in terms of whether or not a position like this is for you. And I would say that it would be good to try to touch base with someone that that maybe works in organ transplant, or perhaps reaching out to your local OPO, or go through your hospital. If you're working in the hospital, go through them and try to contact your organ donation person through them, because they do have contacts. And I would also say that ICU experience is a plus. I mean, I can't say that enough. And I don't say that just because I was a former ICU nurse and I'm passionate about that, but it really helps with regard to communicating with the surgeons, feeling comfortable communicating with the surgeons, organizing your time, which is what your initial question was to me, Jeff. Sorry, I digress. But organizing your time and gleaning the important information to share with your surgeons. So when an offer comes into me, and say I get with Buckeye, it is possible because I work for my contract. I work for 4 different transplant centers. So it is likely that I could get, and I have gotten, 2 to 3 heart offers simultaneously within 1 or 2 minutes apart, or 5 minutes apart. And so I may be primary on one, backup on another, which, I'm supposed to treat the backup offers as a primary offer and review it in preparation for possibly becoming primary. So I would look at each offer and see where I am on the list. Okay, if I'm further down on offer A, I will put that on the back burner for a moment. And then that leaves me with 2 offers. Then so I look at B and C, and say I'm primary on B and backup on C. Okay, so I can put C on the back burner for a moment. And so just kind of knowing where you stand, number one, with your simultaneous offers helps you prioritize. In addition, knowing what automatic rule-out criteria you may have for each heart center also helps prioritize or eliminate, an offer quickly, so that you can then concentrate and focus on the primary offer that really might look like a good offer, something your surgeons will be interested in. Knowing your recipients for that center, something that would work good for that recipient size-wise, and any other needs that recipient may have. Maybe they need another kidney, with the heart. So I think, having said all that, your experience and just knowing your rule-out criteria and your surgeons and your recipients helps to fine-tune your prioritizing with, when you get those simultaneous offers.
Yeah, and you brought up, you mentioned backup offers, and you mentioned treating, and I hear this time and time again, that transplant centers need to treat backup offers like primary offers. And, I know we did we looked at some data, and in a 2-week period, we just picked a random, I think 2 weeks in March, and we had over 1,500 backup offers that never became primary. And, every OPO seems to have a different philosophy when it comes to how they approach backup offers. And that's kind of been the problem. And when I talk to coordinators on the phone, when I'm on call, I try to, engage in some of those conversations, because, there's so many backup offers that create so much noise, like you said, Angie, when you're trying to triage and you get a primary notification and you're looking, then you have 30 minutes to evaluate. Who knows, there could be 60 pages of attachments, and now you're getting another call that you're back up, your phone rings twice, and just trying to coordinate all that. Melissa, how do you handle that with the different things going on, your primary, getting backup offers? What's your approach?
I am very, very customer service oriented, and I actually did the Disney College program, 100 years ago. So as Jeff said, we get a lot of backup offers, we get a lot of primary offers, and so kind of managing time is really important, and figuring out which to put first. Of course, every coordinator that sends out an offer to you doesn't realize that you have a lot of other offers, so they kind of want you to only be working on theirs at one time, which isn't really possible. So what I typically do when I get a lot of offers is I look through for my one center, before they will evaluate the offer, I have to know if they're an HLA, if they're a match, if there's any antibodies or antigens. So what I will do is I will call the HLA lab, get them to start working on a virtual cross match, kind of put that on the back burner while I figure out what the others need, see if there are any that I can auto rule out, and then call the coordinators, which, sometimes answer, sometimes don't, because they're also very busy, and just kind of let them know, I've seen it, I'm working on it. Most times that works. It doesn't always. I have started to receive some backup offers for the same donor I'm working on. So if you can imagine, your phone rings to give you an alert, rings again to give you another alert. At the same time, you're getting the emails. At the same time, you have the coordinators calling you. It's pretty difficult because you want to be really thoughtful in the process and kind as you move along, but also use your critical thinking and your nursing skills to evaluate. And it can become a little difficult when you're continuously being interrupted. We get a ton of offers that really need really thorough evaluation, and spending the time on those, I think, is more important than continuously, hearing my phone beep, beep, beep to tell me that there's an offer. So that's something that is definitely challenging. I find that, working with Buckeye, though, I think it's fantastic because, with Jeff and Jill, they're, you guys aren't just the owners, you actually know what we're doing. So any kind of systems that seem to be breaking down, you're trying to figure out how to fix, not, to tell us we'll just work harder, work faster, figure it out. So I really do appreciate that. I think I personally, and I don't know who else feels this way, but I personally get really frustrated with all of the additional noise, not just because it's my time or the surgeon's time that's being used, but I always take myself back to being an ICU nurse or being a donor coordinator and seeing that family that's there waiting. The family and the staff, a lot of people don't understand how organ donation works. And so I do hope that there are other people that listen to this podcast that are organ donors or will be organ donors to understand, why everything takes so long, because there are so many moving parts. So for me, if there is any way that we can shave off some of that time for the families, so they're not grieving, going through one of the worst experiences of their lives, but they can leave there feeling really good about donation, I think that that's worthwhile. And I think that UNOS must have set that 30-minute rule, I hope, with the same type of goal in mind, but it's counterproductive because it slows everything down, and that's really difficult. And the number of offers that we get, honestly, that are going nowhere, that I don't have an auto rollout for, but I know 100% when I call the physician and present it to them, they're going to say no, thank you, is pretty significant. So I think that if there was a better way to, evaluate things across the board, where at the very minimum, we at least had the same view as the on-site coordinators, and if the same information was available, and if the, all of those 20 some documents that we need to read through, if they were labeled. I mean, one of my most important documents, which decided on heart acceptance or denial just this past weekend, was labeled number 3. Like, that was literally the only label, was number 3. And it was a very important document, and we did end up accepting the heart, and it's been successfully transplanted. But, had I been busy, or had I not gone through every single one, or had I just thought, number 3, that can't be anything important, it would be much nicer if things were labeled appropriately. And I think that it would be not only more smooth for organ donation as far as, the OPO and Buckeye, I think it would be more smooth for the hospital, for, the ICU staff that's busy caring for these patients, and for the donor families that are, grieving and waiting for an update as to when are we going to be able to recover these organs and save someone else. So I think that there's a lot of moving parts, and I think everyone has the, same goal. I think there's just maybe the way that we're trying to get there right now, it's delaying things, for sure.
Yeah, You mentioned the UNet view in some things. One of the things when I worked at the OPO, before coming to, Buckeye full time, was the donor highlight section. And I remember my approach to the highlight section was to anticipate the question I was going to get. So, when I was placing a heart, I would make sure I read the echo, knew what it said, if there was some LVH, if there were some issues, pressors, you name it. We kind of have an idea of, especially since, we talk to our teams, day in and day out. You start to anticipate those questions. And so I would try to put in the highlight section, significant things on the med soc or anything that's going to be a red flag. Sometimes you call, you get a hard offer at sequence 130 and you call the OPO, just inquire, hey, why is this falling, down the list so far? And a lot of times you just get, I don't know, people are putting 830 and not calling me back. But sometimes OPOs will put C Med Soc attachment, in the Med Soc section. If there was some standardization to what went in the highlights, what went into the Med Soc, I think that would do a lot to speed up the process. And exactly like you said, renaming, or having some type of standard naming for the attachments. Like you said, number three. Uh, that can mean different things, and unless you go in and click each one and open it, which is what we have to do, and that takes a lot of time.
It does. It does. Yeah, I was going to say, Jeff, if you could sum it up, well, if I could sum it up, I'd say communication is the key. Communication is the key. It's the key to presenting an organ efficiently and effectively. It's the key to prioritizing which offer to look at first. So you call, I would send a text to offer B. Hey, I've got another offer at the same time, came 2 minutes before yours. I'm getting to yours, I promise. And it's always appreciated. So, it helps all the way around communication.
Yeah, and I know that we had and I think I brought this up before. Uh, if there's an echo report on the main page in UNEP, and then there's a second echo that was done, and sometimes it's not typed up in the section that we see when we first look at UNET. And when you go in, we had an offer. And as we were evaluating it and we clicked on that second echo, it talked about a vegetation on the heart valve, which wasn't noted in the first one. But obviously, it wasn't right apparent on the highlights section. It's something that we had to go digging for, and that's something that we do a really good job at Buckeye, especially since a lot of us have that OPO background. We're kind of in tune to that to pick up on these things and to find those things in DonorNet. So Angie, can you tell us a little bit about your the interview process coming to Buckeye and a little bit about the work-life balance that you were in search of?
Yes, absolutely. My interview process with Buckeye was amazing. And I'm not just saying that because you're on the other line, but it really, really was. It was like I interviewed with Nathan and Jill, and it was as if
I think Derek. It was Derek and Jill, but both
Derek.
both
Okay.
are. Yeah,
Okay.
Nathan's the payroll guy. Yeah, Derek's the HR guy.
Oh, okay. So yes, it was Derek and Jill, and honestly, it was just like this. It was we had a conversation. I ended up, we just kind of ended up talking, and I kind of ended up answering Derek's questions, and he would ask me questions, and it was as if I'd known them. It was an easy conversation. It was an easy conversation. It was like meeting friends that I hadn't met in a long time. I hadn't seen in a long time. It was very laid back. Um, Even though they were still looking for the answers they were looking for and asking questions, it was laid back and it was comfortable, and I just don't know what else to say about it. It was a great experience. It really was. It was like I had catching up with long lost friends.
And
um,
what about the work-life balance as far as, after the interview process and you joined the team, got acclimated to the team, how has the work-life balance been in your mind?
In my mind, it's been great. It really has. When you come to Buckeye, you're given, at least when I did. I don't know. We're in the process of ever evolving and improving systems, so we're in the process of changing the days of call days. But when I started in February, you had the option of working anywhere from for full time. What was it, Jeff? I think 11 to 14 call days, maybe.
Yeah, it used to be 12 to 14. When we started back in 2008, we could do 17, 18 days. But as the landscape of transplant and the allocation system changed, it ended up being 12 to 14. And now we're kind of at the 10 to 12 day range is what we shoot for.
Yes, yes. So I opted to kind of somewhere in the middle of the road. I said, well, I'll work 12 to 13. And so I was working 12, and that was working fine with my work-life balance. I have two children. They're both active in sports, and my daughter plays the saxophone, and she just picked that up. And it's worked out well. I'm able to get them to school and pick them up with those number of call days. And with the changes that you've been implementing with the scheduling, now I'm working 10. So that too is working. That is working as well. And there's opportunities to pick up other days where my particular team works really well together. And if we need to switch a day or pick up a day for a teammate or even half of a shift, we always come together and work that out for each other. So not only is the teamwork there, but the work-life balance is there, solid. Yep.
And then we'll go over to you, Melissa. I know I've called you a few times and you're on the golf cart taking your daughter to school. I guess that's another luxury of living in the South, of having good weather most of the time to do that. So, what was coming here? Was it what you thought it was like, or, how would you describe your work-life balance and working at Buckeye?
Um, Good question. So I honestly am not sure that I know what I thought it was going to be like, because at the time when I was looking for the job, I wanted to have a job, but didn't necessarily need to have one, that exact minute. I just knew I would, potentially sooner rather than later. So when I interviewed with Jill, I mean, we talked for over an hour, and it was just like, talking to an old friend. And it was really refreshing. Everything she told me about how you guys started the company and your backgrounds, I just thought, oh my gosh, I wish that I created this. It's such a smart idea. And I just, got drawn in with everything that she told me. I was really excited to start. And then once I learned the different process and learned, where we keep and store everything and all of the policies and procedures and the things that are, the systems that we follow, it became so apparent that Buckeye is so organized, and you really are set up for success. So once I learned those systems even more, then yes, I got really comfortable with, leaving home on call on the golf cart to take my daughter to school. And it's been great. I started in May, about a month and a half, 2 months after we were, home with COVID, not us having COVID, but home because of COVID. And I was able to keep my daughter home from school last year and, homeschooled her for second grade. And we had a lot of fun together, and we had a lot of, there's a lot of flexibility. So I was really able to be really present. And I think that that's something that I'll always be grateful for. Now that she's back in school, I'm here in the mornings, and I'm here when she gets, off of the bus, and she knows that sometimes I'm busier than others, and she knows, when to be quiet and when she doesn't have to. She helps me calculate out some things when I'm, going to present offers. She probably knows a whole lot more about drugs than most third graders do, because she hears me, talk about past medical histories and things. And I think it's really important for the work-life balance, because I'm able to go to physical therapy for my back. Sometimes if it's a call day and it's too busy and I know I could call one of my team members and say, hey, could you listen out for me for an hour? I'm able to take her, to gymnastics and to dance and to horseback riding, to all the things she wants to do. And I'm able to just go and, walk around town and sit in a coffee shop, or just, watch
as she calls it, murder mysteries. I can, sit and watch TV if that's what I want to do for the day. Just knowing that, the job comes first, and I can basically anything you can pick up and put down, you can do on a day that you're working. So as long as it's something I can pick up and put down, I really like that. Ultimately, I think what I love the most is I'm someone that has to be using my brain to feel, I guess, good about myself. So I love that I can still do all of these things with my personal life, but I can still get on the phone with the surgeon, have an intelligent conversation, and get things moving whatever direction they need to go. And I really like that I'm able to model that for my daughter, that I'm able to model, being able to be flexible and to find what works when it can, because in having to move with 12 days notice without a plan to going through a pandemic, to just kind of figure it out. And so that's what we've done, just figured it out every step as we go. And Buckeye has turned out to be more than I had anticipated, and I think that I'm probably a lifer, and you're not going to be able to get rid of me. And I just enjoy it.
Yeah, I'd like to add one thing to what Melissa said too, if I could, Jeff. So yeah, you mentioned your kids, Melissa. It provides a lot of teaching moments for me, for my children. And that's kind of neat. Yeah, that's kind of neat because, they do hear us, and my daughter is very inquisitive. And so it's neat because, like I said, we're teaching our kids a few things too on the side while we're working. So it's good. We teach them about not only, anatomy, physiology, or drugs, but also about, waiting and, return and have some patience with mommy and, 1 second. And so there's a lot of good teaching moments working from home, like in this profession with your kids around.
Angie, I have used that same exact with waiting, because one of the things I do is for one of the centers are kidneys. So on the wait list,
it says how many days they've waited. So I've had her for math figure out with me, how many years is this? So I've used that with her sometimes when she maybe wants mommy to watch a show with her and it's not a time where I'm at a place where I can do that because I'm busy. I'll tell her, Mr. Smith has waited. Let's figure out how long. And she'll, we'll calculate it out. And she'll say, oh my gosh, 6 years. I'm like, yes, this man has waited 6 years and mommy's going to help him. Do you think you can maybe wait like 35-ish minutes? And right away, she's just, she's 8 years old, but she gets part of it. Like, oh gosh, mommy, please help him. He's waited a really long time. So I think there's a lot of teaching opportunities for sure.
Yeah. My daughter says, oh, that's a great size heart for him, mommy. Yes, that's right, baby. It is. That's a good calculation.
Well, that's great. Hey, much appreciated you guys sharing those stories, and I really appreciate the conversation and the feedback, the positive things. We're very fortunate to have coordinators like you guys, and that's really been this. The other secret to the success is finding great coordinators that exceed the expectations of our transplant centers every day. So thank you both for doing that. Well, that concludes our podcast, and we'd like to thank our guests, Melissa and Angie, for joining the show today. For more information about Buckeye, you can visit us on our website at buckeyetransplant.com, or you can reach out to us at contactus@buckeyetransplant.com. See you next time.